The truth is, most of the time we spend practicing drawing is hurting us more than it's helping us. For the past few months I've been studying anatomy every day, forcing myself to stay consistent, until it led me back to the same uncomfortable question. Why does it still feel like nothing has actually changed? And no matter how much time you spend, you are still starting all over again. So if this doesn't work, how are you supposed to learn drawing at all? That's why I spent months on Bilibili studying how Chinese artists actually learn, and what I found is something extremely simple but crucial that most artists don't even realize they're missing. Stay with me until the end and you will learn the secret skill Chinese artists use that turns your practice into real progress. Most of the time, a good study just means doing lots of detailed copies. But if that's true, why does all that effort feel pointless? If all you do is just copy everything you see, this doesn't create real progress. That mindless copying is exactly what makes every new drawing painfully slow and frustrating. So if this doesn't build a skill, what actually does? On Bilibili I learned that Chinese artists love drawing through Xin, or shape capturing. It's the ability to filter what you see, so instead of just copying, you're forced to make it your own. Look at these two. Which one looks better? Obviously this one. On this study I spent a whole day, forced myself to get a perfect copy, and I get it, but it looks like tracing. But here I spent just 10 minutes testing completely different options. So what does Xin actually look like? If you look at artists like us, they build everything from very simple shapes, yet it looks complex and alive. But when you draw studies, you just can't resist copying every tiny change in the silhouette, every wiggly line. And honestly, that could work, if those shapes were even possible to remember. But it doesn't. Like with anatomy here. If all you do, like me, is try to learn fully detailed realistic anatomy from the start, you'll never stop relying on references. Change the pose and you are stuck again searching for another reference. And that's create a gap between what you want to draw and what you actually can. So the real question is, why are you even trying to learn it this way? If you reduce all the useless visual noise to a few simple lines, you can actually draw it without looking back at the reference. That's exactly what Xin or shape cutting is. So how do Chinese artists train this skill? If you don't really understand what are you drawing, how are you supposed to simplify it? Especially if you don't even know the rules. So the easiest way to start is to find these shapes directly over your reference, and only then you try to repeat them on your own. That's what I do inside Milanote, where I keep my references and notes, which makes the whole study process and tracking progress faster and more painless. So here is the rule. For each big shape, you only use 5 to 7 straight lines. If you use less, the shapes become too primitive and loses character. If you need more, it's already too complex to control or remember. And this is exactly what most artists miss about observation. But how does this actually help you? Well, look at this. How are you supposed to draw a bent leg like this? Relying only on the references, you train yourself to make the same decision over and over again, instead of thinking in shapes as something you can move and change. Look at how it works in Xin. I take those same pieces and slightly transform and overlap them, and now the leg is bent. You didn't add anything new, and this works for everything you study, because when you practice like this, you are not just memorizing shapes, you are learning how these shapes relate to each other, until you try to draw it. Even if you repeat the shapes perfectly, it doesn't mean the drawing will look right, because shape cutting only gives you structure, but without proportions, every attempt will be inconsistent. So how do Chinese artists control it? Instead of starting from a blank canvas, you match the aspect ratio of the reference first and divide the space with simple cross lines. Look at this. Now every part has a fixed position and you can finally see how much space each part takes, and more importantly, control every direction and line length while drawing. This Xinjun, or shape accuracy, is the main reason why so many artists still struggle when studying. Now you know how to build this skill fast and actually make it work. But what happens next? On the third part of Xin, you can finally finish it. And this is where your old habits ruin everything you just created. If you go back to copying like before, yeah, with shape capturing you'll copy faster and more precisely. But if it was useless before, why should it start working now? So Chinese artists learn to add detail through Guoluqi, or a visual filter. filter. But unlike shape cutting, the limit expands, so now you have 2 more types of lines to work with. And those 3 lines are what actually save you from starting mindless copying again, while still capturing all the details you need. Because if you look at realistic art, even where you'd expect a perfect anatomical silhouette, shapes are simplified. And that's how artists like us keep consistency across their illustrations. At this point, shape capturing looks like a complete skill, but all these steps only help you practice. So what are you actually supposed to do? Many artists get stuck studying perfect shapes in isolation, but none of it actually works until you make it fit the style you want. That's what you'll find inside the free Adapt Kit, a simple guide to break down any style step by step. If you want to get better at learning, grab it for free in the description. So how do you actually apply draw scene in your own art? When you start drawing, there is this strong feeling to challenge yourself and draw everything from imagination. But instead of ignoring references, the real secret is treating them like Lego blocks, where you take different parts and combine their simple shapes into something completely new. So the first thing I do is build my reference board using Milanote Web Clipper, which makes it easy to collect everything without interrupting the process. I like that every image keeps its original source, so when I need something similar, I can easily find it. And finally, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description. But the real problem starts when you actually try to use more than one reference. So how do you combine them? The character I picked has 2 main parts in the design: the clothes, which easily fits the pose, and the wings. They're my favorite part, but are they actually that hard to draw? Without shape capturing, the first instinct would be to start copying the feathers, how they bend, overlap each other, searching through different bird wing references. Instead, break this into 2 separate parts that you can build and layer together. But if you try to use a basic coordinate system here, it gets a bit overwhelming. So I went back to Bilibili, and what I found was a more advanced theme June that actually makes this usable. The main difference is that instead of drawing lines across the whole canvas, you place them only on the object you are building and where they simplify measurement. So now you can precisely combine parts from different references at any scale or angle, because you are only measuring what matters. But even this method still feels clunky and uncomfortable. That's exactly how it should feel. You didn't really think the most important thing Chinese artists learn is just a grid with simplified shapes, right? The real goal of draw scene is to train yourself to process every stroke in your head before you draw it. As soon as this skill runs in the background, you'll finally be able to draw from imagination. But to get there, you still have to go through every step of the process first, even though shape capturing takes time to build. But you can already use stylization techniques that make things much easier. I break them down in the next video.